What is the strongest stand in all of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure? That question is a lot harder to answer than you would think. With over 180 stands continuing to this very day, and a part that is still blossoming, there is a lot to choose from. Simultaneously, with such a vocal and opinionated community like JoJo's, it's very hard to narrow it down just to 10. With some thinking that you can't outright power scale JoJo's, or that you can outsmart any stand, it doesn't matter. The weakest guy can beat the strongest guy just because they outsmarted them. However, that couldn't be farther from the truth, either coming from Araki himself that he power scales, or literal examples within the actual show or manga showing us, the audience, that yeah, when you have a crazy hack or ability, there is no level of intelligence that you can actually beat it. You're not going to be able to outpredict or outsmart people with infinite speed or the ability to predict the future with raw intelligence alone. You only make it into the top 10 if you have some of the best stats in the entire franchise, abilities, or hacks. It's just the reality of the situation, or a mix of the three. And if you think a stand from 10 years ago is still the strongest, I'm about to give you a very hard reality wake-up call. Spoiler, it's not. Just like Araki, things change with time. Things get better, things get stronger. That being the case, I think the list I have made right now is probably going to be the most accurate for a very long time, till the end of part 9, where supposedly November Rain might become the strongest stand in the franchise, thanks to, well, a power scaling list that Araki has recently made. Hell, I'll even give you a lowball list, because I've made some arguments on the channel that some stands that a lot of people think are very powerful might not actually be. So I'll give you even a super dose of who the strongest stand is in all of JoJo. I present to you the strongest stands within JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. And oh, by the way, hello, my name is Metas. Walk with me. So hopping immediately into it, let's talk about the bottom 5, with number 10 being a split decision, at least in terms of the highball list, with the lowball only having one of the stronger of the two, and those stands being Bohemian Rhapsody and Heaven's Door. That's because both of these stands have insanely powerful hacks that basically, if you don't have a better hack to fight against it, it's kind of a guaranteed loss. Bohemian Rhapsody has the ability to, on a planetary-wide scale, if not an infinite scale, summon fictional characters from images, stories, and etc. Said fictional characters across all of human history will genuinely act and behave the same way they would in a story. So, for example, Darth Vader is still a dick, Superman is still the paragon of hope, and Horus Lupercal still has daddy issues. Thankfully, they still can be harmed even coming off the pages, and still can fall victim to their same fates within their original story. Speaking on that, if a stand user or a regular person recognizes the character they are looking at consciously or subconsciously, their soul and their stand, if applicable, will start to mirror the same story. For example, if you recognize Superman, which I think a lot of people would, depending on what story you recognize or you probably know the most, you will probably end up becoming Lex Luthor and being defeated by Superman, or if in a very egregious case, you will become Darkseid and die by the hands of Superman. Now that's just one example. You could start using a hell of a lot. You could be fighting Goku and end up becoming Frieza and die. You could possibly fight Emperor Palpatine and become Darth Vader and be electrocuted, dying in the hands of Luke Skywalker much later. The possibilities are quite literally endless. And while yes, you can quite literally kill these fictional characters, erasing them from not existence, but at least from physical media, this would be incredibly hard to do so. Anasui and Weather Report were only able to do this against weaker characters because they fought none of these stronger characters in fiction at the time. And even if you were to kill, hypothetically, Darth Vader or any of the stronger characters in fiction, this does not affect the stand or the stand user. So you have to kill the stand or the stand user in order to stop Bohemian Rhapsody and the manipulation of fiction. However, that might be impossible because of the stand's range being planetary. The stand user could be across the entire other side of the world, while you on the other side, effectively making it impossible to kill the stand user and the stand. But, and I mean a very huge but, since the thing makes anything fictional come into reality, if you were to make an OC or a character that just beats all of fiction, Bohemian Rhapsody will make that come true. Easier said than done because it took Weather Report a while to figure that out. However, in a best case scenario, if you were to meet somebody like Reed Richards, Batman, Superman, basically anybody with a high level intellect within fiction, while they are still subject to following the same fate of their stories, they can act independently through the way they think some of the time. meaning that if you did meet Reed Richards, he would end up just telling you, hey, to defeat this stand, make a character that can beat all of fiction, and the stand user and the stand itself, which did happen within the story. Thanks to its range and stand ability, I can confidently say it's one of the stronger stands, if not in the top 10 of the strongest stands in JoJo's. The only thing that's holding it back is its glaring weakness. However, I think for the most part it would defeat most stand users. It's just everybody above him or equal to him are smart enough to figure that out. Don't get me wrong, while Innisui and Weather Report are very powerful, they're not the smartest. Which brings us to our other number 10 spot, being Rohan Kishibe's Heaven's Door. Now, Heaven's Door has a hell of a lot to it, and I'm not joking about that. Not because its abilities are complex or overly powerful, it's just because it depends on how you either take its statements or feats or its showings in other media as canon or not. In a vacuum, Heaven's Door in part 4 is very powerful, basically forcing people either seeing the early pages of a manga or being physically touched by Heaven's Door allows Rohan to make you a book. Said book will tell everything Rohan about your life, and anything written in said person book will become true. So either you could become Rohan's slave, or a dramatic part of your personality could be changed. In a physical example, Rohan can rip these pages out of you to make you lighter. While the stand is not built for combat, if it were in a combat scenario and if it were to touch you, it is a guaranteed loss, as Rohan could easily write in the self-book that you cannot harm Rohan Kishibe, making the fight effectively useless, as Rohan will never get injured by your hands or your stand. Funny enough, on top of that, Rohan and Heaven's Door have some pretty nasty scaling on top of that in terms of physical stats. Rohan was able to survive a crash out from Crazy Diamond in an enraged state. Mind you, a enraged Crazy Diamond and Josuke threaten a Jotaro Kujo in part 4, who now is even stronger than his part 3 counterpart. Mind you, his part 3 counterpart could easily scale from small town to large mountain depending on how you view him, making Rohan's durability really high. However, when we talk about its speed, this is where shit hits the fan. The stand is able to keep up with or even surpass some stands who can reach either as fast as light speeds to massively faster than light plus speeds. And in a very egregious case, Rohan Kishibe and Heaven's Door were able to keep up with Maiden Heaven's infinite time acceleration, possibly meaning that Heaven's Door could possibly reach infinite speeds, depending on whether that's a joke or not. I know some people honestly actually get pissed off at that feat, which is crazy. However, this is the same guy who fought deities, which brings us to the other side of this conversation. Up till now, I've been talking about mainline Rohan for the most part. However, Rohan has an extended category of stories outside of the mainline parts of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. At most, there are 4 different versions of Rohan, that being mainline Rohan, then the first half of Thus Spoke Rohan Kishibe, that is an alternate version of the original, then the part 9 variant, and then the part 9 variant of that one being the later half of Thus Spoke Rohan Kishibe, with possibly a potential 5th one, that being Rohan at the Louvre, as he is able to use his stand ability completely different compared to the other ones, as he is able to affect himself with Heaven's Door, which has never been shown before with any of the other versions of Rohan. So if you gigawank Rohan and Heaven's Door, you get a character with small town to small city level durability, FTL to possibly infinite speeds, a stand ability that basically allows him to win any fight if he wants to, the ability to get rid of infinite information from him and others, and being so smart he can challenge deities multiple times over, small or big. However, I think it is genuinely unfair to use such a powerful composite version of the character who could possibly rival other characters on this list who aren't composite versions. And simultaneously, I don't even know the canon validity of most of these stories, as they are kind of weird while fitting into the original timeline or the timeline just in general for JoJo's. So the one I'm placing here next to Bohemian Rhapsody is the mainline version of the character with the early parts of Thus Spoke Rohan Kishibe. And this won't be the last time I talk about Rohan in this video because I need him for a later argument. Overall, Heaven's Door is a very powerful stand. However, if you have a time-related ability or somehow can get around being touched by Heaven's Door, you can beat Rohan. I think Bohemian Rhapsody and Heaven's Door, either on a high ball or low ball list, are perfect gatekeepers to the higher echelons of these stands later in this video, as the only way to beat these two are through better hacks or better stats. So moving on to number 9, we have The World. Funny enough, a few years ago, I actually would have placed The World and the AU version of it a bit higher. However, thanks to recent magazine statements, I think he's a bit lower now, but not by much. The World has the ability to stop time continuously. As it uses it more, time stop will grow, with its max being shown is about 9 seconds with the potential to move in frozen time for a maximum of 11 seconds. seconds, with Dio primarily using it to catch people off guard in frozen time, effectively killing them in one shot. That's due in part to the fact that the world is very, very, very powerful. It is near an exact copy of Star Platinum in terms of stats. Now, Star Platinum stats, as something I'll be referring to a lot here in this early portion of the video, thanks to the Sun Feat by Silver Chariot and scaling off of Silver Chariot to Star Platinum, ranges from small town level to at the maximum you can give it is mountain level, with multiple statements from guidebooks, stand stats, scaling inverse, stating that Star Platinum is massively faster than light. All those same stats are applicable to the world and possibly the AU version of it from Steel Ball Run, having those same stats if you believe they are similar, with no association fallacy. The only difference being is that the AU version of it only can stop time for 5 seconds. Other than the major difference in time stop between Star Platinum and the world might be the fact that Dio might have a lower durability than his AP, unlike Jotaro, who possibly has a higher durability than his AP output, seeing his fight against, well, Dio. Overall, the world is very easy to understand. It has a very basic ability that is very overpowered in practice, with a good amount of stats backing it up. The only reason why it's this far down is because other characters have vastly better abilities and vastly better stats. And speaking about stats, we come to number 8, that being King Crimson and Diavolo. Like I said previously, a few years ago these two would have been swapped, but thanks to the Winter JoJo magazine, states that King Crimson and Diavolo are stronger than a Part 3 Jotaro and Part 3 Polnareff tag teaming together, therefore meaning that King Crimson and Diavolo are stronger than Dio. So apply all of his stats onto King Crimson. That's also further backed up by the fact that King Crimson watched a stronger version of Silver Chariot and Polnareff during the Part 4 era, more or less confirming that fact. However, where they majorly differ is the fact that King Crimson operates completely differently than the world's time stop. King Crimson has the ability to perceive 10 seconds into the future and skip over it if it's undesirable, allowing Diavolo to basically skip over very bad fates for himself. So if he was going to die for whatever reason, he can skip over that, being basically completely immune. However, anybody during that, other than Diavolo, is still subject to the same fate. And while I'm not taking a heavy amount of character into this because I want to make that a separate top 10, Diavolo is a no-joke kind of stand user, so he tries to effectively end fights as fast as possible while trying to keep his identity a secret. So in a fight against the world, Diavolo would try to finish that fight as fast as possible, while Dio would kind of just be his arrogant, prideful self, always testing his limits, leading to a loss. However, if you wanted to flip these, I wouldn't be too against it, but I do think both of them definitely belong in the top 10. However, though, on a low ball list, I would actually place King Crimson a bit higher than some of the SBR characters, but we'll talk about that later. So, the problem area. The next 3 stands I'm going to talk about are basically a 3-way tie. So 6th, 7th, and 5th place can be mixed and matched any way you want, just because of how crazy the statements get here and how contradictory they are at some times, as it's never been clarified who truly is the strongest by the end of the original universe. And if you're a longtime fan, you know who I'm talking about. Star Platinum, Made in Heaven, and GER, aka Gold Experience Requiem. Now, I've already talked about Star Platinum stats through King Crimson and the world, so I'm not going to go over it again. But something I haven't really talked about in depth with here is the fact that Star Platinum has the ability to stop time for 5 whole seconds, thanks to his fight with Dio at the end of Part 3. But in Part 4, it is reduced to 2 seconds because he hasn't used it in over a decade. However, it's still physically one of the strongest stands in the world at that time, even compared to King Crimson. That is backed up by the fact that the Winter JoJo magazine states that it would take a Part 4 Jotaro and Part 4 Polnareff in order to beat King Crimson, which leads us into Part 6, which is a healthy mix of the two, being slightly physically weaker, but still having a long time stop of 5 seconds, while still being called the ultimate stand or having the ultimate stand ability. Keep that in mind for later, we're going to need to use that. Which brings us to the next ultimate stand, or a stand with an ultimate ability, being Gold Experience Requiem. The reason why Gold Experience gains the title of either the ultimate stand or the stand with the ultimate ability is the fact of its primary ability, Return to Zero, which gives the stand user, or rather should I say the stand, have the passive ability to make all attacks return to zero like they never even happened. Being so powerful, it makes GER bend fate in its favor. Example, King Crimson was fated to kill GER and Giorno. However, because GER returned that attack to zero, it never happened, allowing GER to kill King Crimson in a devastating combo. And since it has the ability to dominate any type of soul, putting Diavolo through the death loop. However, it's only applicable after death, plus it's not very well explained. At most, GER can technically reduce a person's will to zero, making them not want to fight, but that's due to the fact that, well, none of their attacks will be effective against it if you don't have the proper hacks. with the added bonus that Gold Experience Requiem still has all of Gold Experience's Life Giver abilities, which there is a hell of a lot, and I'll just flash on screen right here. And when it comes to stats, GR is stronger than King Crimson, who is roughly stronger than a Part 4 Jotaro, or possibly equal to, with the added measure that its stats or its stand stats no longer fit the conventional means of scaling there. Now, strictly looking at these two, when you try to quantifiably measure each other both up, we come racing into the fact that in terms of stats, they are basically equal. So the only thing that you can really differentiate between the two in terms of who wins is whose ability is better. And since the contradictory statement of having multiple ultimate stands or multiple ultimate stand abilities basically means their abilities kind of cancel each other out in terms of just like statements, meaning as viewers, we have to determine that on our own. Now, personally, crazy to say, I think GR is stronger. His toolkit is just a lot wider, and I think just like King Crimson, Return to Zero would work on time skip and time stop. However, I need to clarify this. Just because GR says it's unstoppable and no ability would affect it doesn't mean it's true. That is a vacuum statement. It only exists in that part. It's never confirmed after the fact. That is not being taken into account right now. Hell, it's even contradicted with Star Platinum's ultimate stand ability statement. So who truly knows? Is what I would say, unless Araki didn't go on a power scaling spree in terms of art and actual statements as of recently. I present to you again the Fountain Boy statement I presented at the beginning of the video with November Rain, where it shows Star Platinum the World and Killer Queen, for whatever fucking reason. I don't know why he added that bum ass stand. I'm figuring it's because of, you know, the whole nature of duality, which the art piece is trying to say, above Tusk and all of its acts and Goal Experience, including its Requiem form, because there is reasons to say why Tusk Act 1 is above Stone Free when Stone Free should be stronger than Tusk Act 1, so we have to infer that it's all of Tusk's acts and Gold Experience's forms for it to make logical sense. So now we're back at the beginning of this, with either stand being tied with each other or the idea that post Part 5, Star Platinum is still the strongest thanks to some of the statements within Part 6. And then Made in Heaven shows up. Dude, I can't help but laugh like in between cuts because it gets more confusing. Made in Heaven is definitively like so much stronger than Star Platinum and Jotaro that he one-shots and blitzes the entire Stone Ocean crew except for two people, those two people being one of them unscathed and one of them heavily injured, which he then proceeds to blitz shortly afterwards. This stand's claim to fame is the fact that it has infinite speeds that allow it to basically time travel and remove people from the timeline, allowing Pucci to manipulate fate. If you die, you are then replaced with an alternate universe counterpart that is different from you enough that you won't be a threat. This stand ability is so freakishly powerful that it broke Araki during the end of Part 6, making him even question if he could even continue JoJo's. Mind you though, this is where things get weird, this stand is not considered the ultimate stand or has an ultimate ability, unless you want to infer that, which means we have a Mexican standoff between Star Platinum, Gold Experience Requiem, and Made in Heaven. And on screen, I'll show you guys the rock, paper, scissors, back and forth all three of these stands have. And for the people actually wondering in the background too, as I'm just saying it, what if we actually did bring in character like we did with some of the lower tiers on this list? Even then, all three of them are combative geniuses, with shockingly Giorno having the least amount, which then would infer that Jotaro and Pucci should win, but remember, their stands pale in comparison to GR in terms of ability, and the cycle just continues again and again and again. However, there is a way to kind of break it up at least a little bit. However, this heavily leans into Araki's mindset as an author. Looking back at Heaven's Door is always continuously evolving, growing stronger over the years ever since the end of Part 4, with many other stands getting clarification in guidebooks or statements, making them much more impressive in retrospect. And Araki as an author is always trying to grow and evolve with his art form, and that means in many different ways, including the stand system, always making it better and stronger in each part that it takes place in. So while not definitively said to be the ultimate stand, it can be inferred by the end of Part 6, Made in Heaven is the strongest stand, meaning that Gold Experience Requiem and Star Platinum the World are still fighting below it in a never-ending loop of a tie. And on a low ball, these guys' scaling is so definitive that they all get bumped up actually with their never-ending loop of strength. Now, if you were paying attention, Araki said he went through a mental break when making Made in Heaven because of how powerful it was. So what was Araki's answer when making more powerful stands for future parts? Well, that's either giving stands more infinite power, the ability to control some of the strongest aspects of the JoJo universe, being fate, calamity, fortune, misfortune, etc., or abilities that just transcend even those. I present to you the SBR scaling. So, unlike the clusterfuck that was the last 3 stands, D4C Love Train in number 4 is a lot easier to explain. It simply goes as the following: as long as Funny Valentine and D4C are within the light barrier of Love Train, no misfortune can befall either of them, redirecting somewhere else or to their opponents, in some cases ultimately killing them. This ability is so powerful it affects the entire planet and possibly even past and present, redirecting misfortune there as well. And on top of that, Funny Valentine and D4C still have their previous abilities of being able to travel the multiverse, bringing multiple different variations of Funny Valentine, who he can body swap with, making him effectively immortal, and having the ability to potentially one-shot if 2 of the same objects cross each other's paths. Now, in terms of physical stats, Funny Valentine and D4C Love Train scale to, of course, Johnny Joestar, and those 2 scale to alternative universe Diego with the world. So of course, at their highest, they're all massively faster than Light Plus, with small city to possibly large mountain level AP at its highest. That also applying to durability as well. However though, that's with a non-fallacy play not in effect. If it is in effect, things get pretty bad really quick. The highest scaling you go if you do not take AU Diego's scaling into effect means that everybody in Steel Ball Run Part 7 is just bullet timers with small building, durability, and AP, aside from Tusk Act 4 and Ball Breaker, who potentially have infinite to just straight up infinite AP. Luckily though, because of how D4C Love Train's ability works, none of the scaling really hinders him, as it kind of circumnavigates around durability and AP scaling, as it will just place a random act of misfortune on top of you, potentially leading to the death of you, similar to Gyro. And even on a low ball list, he's still in the top 5, depending on where you want to place him because of stats. He's still in the top 5, possibly even number 2, and on the high ball list is number 4, just because of how his ability works. He can just sit in the light barrier all he wants and let the universe do the work for him. So moving on to number 3, being Tusk Act 4 and Ball Breaker, being very similar to the number 10 situation. However, it's still mostly Tusk Act 4. Tusk Act 4's claim to fame is that Tusk Act 4 can hit with infinite punching power, being able to pierce the dimensional barrier or the light barrier of D4C Love Train, which transcends dimensions. This ability is so powerful, even switching bodies in a different universe does not stop it, as it technically even affects the stand itself, rotating every individual cell infinitely until oblivion, potentially, and this might just be a vague statement just like GR stating no ability will affect it, potentially even affecting the very soul itself. If you want a layman's way of explaining it, basically if you are hit with the infinite rotation, you're dead. On top of all of that, Tusk Act 4 and its infinite rotation bullet can even move during stopped time, transcending it thanks to the ability or vague ability of controlling gravity, which in terms of JoJo lingo means it might be affecting fate itself. And to big brain this, because we're still in the highball section of explaining the stand, means that we're just back to the ultimate stand or the ultimate ability argument. The circle never ends. I'm always constantly arguing for part 6. I don't get it. I don't know why. I hate it. I hate it so much. Dear God, please help me. Now, all of that scaling applies to Ball Breaker as well. That's it. That's all I can really say about Ball Breaker. It does that. The reason why I didn't end up doing it in the first place was because Lucy was on top of the horse. Which brings me to my next point. When using the golden rotation on top of a horse, the horse has to be healthy and non-injured, and must be running in a specific way. If these requirements are not met, or at least the energy is flowing through you, the ability will not hit with an infinite punching power. It will hit for a hell of a lot, but not infinity. And of course, on a high ball with no fallacy applied, Tusk Act 4 is as strong as the world, making the overall stand very, very powerful. Unless you're using its low ball scaling, which then it's trash, which I won't lie, nearing the end of this video, I low-key like the low ball list better than the high ball list, because I might not actually like the AU scaling, but that's my personal opinion. Because low-key, it jumps through a lot of hoops to make those characters powerful. I'm not gonna lie. So because of how atrociously bad those physical stats are, I'd place Tusk Act 4 and Ball Breaker in 8th place in terms of the low ball list, which just leaves the final 2. Soft and Wet Go Beyond and Wonder Review. If any of you know modern JoJo power scaling at its highest level, when you're using all your arguments, if not the best arguments for all of these stands, these two will always be on the top of the leaderboard. Now, to scale both properly, I need to talk about Wonder Review first. Wonder Review and Toru's ability comes from the fact that it is able to control calamity, or the flow of logic of the universe itself. How it uses it in practice is when somebody is following Toru, the head doctor, or Wonder Review itself, random acts of calamity coming in as knocking effects will collide into you. At first they will be annoying, but the more you pursue the stand user, or the head doctor disguise, these calamities will get stronger and stronger and stronger. Random furniture at one point can knock into a person and can cripple you, with a more egregious example being literal raindrops more or less being bullets that you cannot defend yourself against, almost crippling Josuke and Mamazuku Rai. Basically, any object that collides into you becomes hyper lethal no matter what kind of object it is. This is the flow of calamity that Wonder Review is able to manipulate, a random attack that nobody can predict at any time. Now, we don't know actually how Wonder Review manipulates it, either through past events leading into the present or potentially manipulating future events that eventually will collide into you. Fun fact, that's all at its basic level. It still gets stronger. In the event that you perceive its stand user Toru, an instant death clause will activate, meaning some form of random calamity that you cannot control will randomly hit you. In the case of Yasuho, it was a random airplane part that had no apparent connection to the story whatsoever, destined to kill her. She only survived because Soft and Wet Go Beyond's illogical nature saved her last second, meaning that if you don't have an illogical ability, which there is only one of in JoJo because all stand abilities are logical within its own continuity or universe, means that nobody would be able to parry it other than Soft and Wet Go Beyond, because misfortune, fortune, gravity, and fate, which those main four contribute to the laws of physics, manipulate everything else within this universe we watch and read. That's confirmed by the fact that it manipulates other people's actions and other stand abilities within the part itself, which is even further backed up by the volume 27 statement Araki provides at the end of JoJolion, stating that calamity, which Wonder Review embodies, is the strongest thing anybody can face, point blank, period. And at its highest form, in the event somehow through an illogical attack Toru dies, Wonder Review will still exist after its stand user has died, and the only way to kill it is through an illogical attack, which, mind you, only one character has. There is no way to kill Wonder Review, as it is calamity itself or a portion of calamity. And looking back at that volume 27 statement, Araki Soft confirms that Wonder Review is the strongest villain as it scales off of all of them. So all the villains that appear on this list, which is a lot of them, Wonder Review scales off of, so his stats are genuinely fucking insane. I've been saying it for years, Wonder Review is stupidly busted, with all of that going back into Soft and Wet Go Beyond. Now, Soft and Wet by himself has the ability to remove or plunder temporarily a portion of the physics of a given item. So, for example, he can remove the friction from a person, making them slide across the floor. And since it's a fuse stand, which is very unique, and thanks to its killer theme background, his bubbles can actually explode, causing small building level explosions. However, Soft and Wet Go Beyond's claim to fame isn't those previous abilities from its lesser form. Its claim to fame is the fact that it's able to spin a bubble so fast to the near 0 point that it becomes illogical to the entire nature of the universe itself, transcending the logic of everything, as it is illogical by its own nature. And as Josuke progressively uses it more and more, Final Form Wonder Review is able to be deleted from existence thanks to Go Beyond. However, though, on a down note, Josuke's stats and abilities aren't that impressive. Like I said before, he does have small building AP and small building durability, but his speed is kind of abysmal, if not even unknown, because we don't know the full implications of it. I've seen some people highball it to at least relativistic, depending on a few scans, but in comparison to the other characters on this list, that's not a hell of a lot. So on a lowball list, I would just place him higher than Tusk Act 4. However, when it comes to Wonder Review and how definitive its scaling and stats are thanks to Araki, GR fucking wishes, Wonder Review, even on a low ball list, is still the strongest stand in all of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Wait. You want me to continue my point in the beginning of the video? Okay, I get, yeah, you know what? Fair enough on that one. So thanks to Araki's Fountain Boy art piece, it kind of low-key spoils the fact that November Rain and then potentially the main villain of Part 9 will be so strong they transcend Wonder View and Soft and Light Go Beyond. What those abilities will be, I can't accurately tell you, but they will be stronger, as the current kind of trend with JoJo's is that every hero and villain just gets stronger and stronger and stronger. That trend kind of started with Part 5 and has been running on very, very well. So on a technicality, we do have a tier 0. It's kind of crazy to imagine the next upcoming villain and hero will just have illogical based powers, probably, that transcend probably, if not all, previous stand users and stands. So at the end of the video, I hope you enjoy both versions of the list. I will try to do my best in post to give all the necessary facts and scaling for all these characters in a crystal clear format for everybody to dissect. And if you have any questions or any arguments against what I said, put it in the comment section down below. I can guarantee you, if I don't reply to it, somebody else will. So with that all being said, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, stay hydrated, and I will see you in the next one, ladies and gentlemen. Deuces.